who actually just went to the University of Illinois. She's a freshman there. And so, as she was going off, he shared with her when he came to this country to go to college to get his master's degree, he came with nothing. The classical story of I started with nothing. So he actually said, though, he had two suitcases with clothes, some family knickknacks, maybe some, Indian snacks or something. But essentially, he just had the clothes that he was going to wear during his time at college and, some basic school supplies. And he worked, he finished his college degree. He worked as an engineer for a short period of time, living with like 5 other guys in a studio apartment just to save enough money. He had married my mother prior to coming over and left her in India with family. And then he brought her over she came over in the early 70s. I was born in 1973. And so they lived on a very tight budget in the city of Chicago in apartments. And my mom tells me that she kept catching me eating bugs off the floor because they were very, dirty apartments they were living in. So she insisted that my father find a place that was much nicer. So we moved to the Chicago suburbs, and I've been in that area now for the last 40 plus years, besides my time in college. So, I reflected on this story, and as I got older and I had more conversations with my father, I realized that it was not an intentional lie, but it was a lie. It was actually a myth, probably more accurately. And what I realized is that he didn't start with nothing. He started with very little material goods, but he had an entire mountain of moral capital that he brought with him to this country. And on that reflection of that is where I've been driving home this 3-word phrase for the campaign of family, friends, and faith. And reflecting on my father's experience, he was the youngest of 3 children, and he was kind of a prodigy in his village in terms of educational prowess. So his father and all of our ancestors in the past were all farmers. In this small village, they raised wheat. They had a couple of cows perhaps for milk and just kind of moving maybe some bulls to plow the fields, but they're very, very modest farmers. But my grandfather said, no, you are going to get an education and you're going to go out into the world and make a difference. And he sensed that way back in, the 50s, that my father had this capability in him. And not only that, the community rallied around him as well. And so they pulled together resources to send him to a boarding school where he excelled and, was able to get a college scholarship in India and then eventually get passage over here. Okay. And obviously, coming over here with nothing intact in terms of finances, he was carrying the weight, but also the pride and the energy and the prayers and the well wishes of his entire community. And obviously the love of his family. And in an Indian culture, like many, ethnic cultures, family wasn't just your nuclear family. It was cousins and aunts, uncles, and many times removed would be considered there's no name for cousin in Gujarati. There's no name for cousin. You call everybody brother, like in the Bible where Jesus, has many brothers, right? So there's no word for that. You treated everyone as if they were your direct sibling. When you would get together, there was no difference. So, when he came over to this country, that was a very, very significant, capital that he did bring with him. And I just saw I wasn't going to talk about this when Norm first asked me to speak, but I saw this meme where someone was trying to say that there's no such thing as white privilege because there was a table of values where Indians were at the top of the median family income at $118,000. And then moving down from there were like the Chinese and Koreans and Pakistanis and many other, people who have come over recently. And then whites had a median family income of like 65,000, and then blacks were on that table at 41,000, And I think the author or the creator of the meme's point was, you see, like all these people have made it, right? So there's no excuse. This is the American dream. And my response to that is, I don't know if many people in America anymore have any moral capital, right? Because the moral capital that comes, that you derive from really intensely close family bonds, extends into your community and makes you respect like all the relationships you have at a very deep level. And I was talking to, I don't know if John Maydai is here. I think he was planning on coming, but I was talking to him earlier this afternoon. And I said, John, you know what really frightens me is when someone says, you know, I lost my home and I'm in danger of becoming homeless. Because to me, when I think about my own family ties and my friend ties and all the ties I have at church, I am 50 levels removed from ever becoming homeless, you know, and that's no great thing that I've done. It's just my understanding and the relationships I have, that if I lost everything I have right now, I have such a lucky network of people I can turn to in times of crisis. And the fact that we're in a society where there are people that haven't been able to make those bonds, or their neighbors haven't helped them make those bonds, and then no one's looking out for each other, that is what I feel like the American Solidarity Party is about. And that's what this campaign is about, because I don't see any other candidate anywhere really talking about that crisis, the crisis of moral capital and the crisis of foundational relationships and institutions that are crumbling because of the liberal, capitalistic, and hedonistic society that we live in. Those things keep breaking down. It doesn't matter who's in office because the ground is dissipating as we speak.
Okay, thanks, Amar. I'm going to take host privilege and ask the first question. It's actually a question that was posed by Charlie Camosi,
Okay.
A collaborator with American Solidarity Party in the past, and ethics teacher at the University of Fordham. And his question, Amar, is the ASP committed more to addressing abortion demand, abortion supply, or roughly committed to both equally?
Yeah, you know, that's a great question. We've had that internal discussion a lot. And I think, you know, the simple answer is definitely both. It's a both and proposition. And we speak of that a lot in our internal dialogue. I think we speak of it a lot. We put it out into our, you know, memes, our posts, and we really challenge, you know, when one side speaks of one without the other, that's kind of a place for us to jump in and say, no, it's always going to be both. And it can't be anything but both. And I think now when I think about, you know, this process of atomization, and that's another layer of, you know, you can address the abortion issue directly, and you could also address the abortion issue indirectly by acknowledging that the reason many women have to choose abortion, or don't have to choose abortion, but they feel compelled to, is because they feel like they're on an island. You know, they don't have those relationships to turn to. You know, they didn't have like a father where my daughter went off to college and I trust her explicitly and implicitly. But I said, if you ever are in a situation where you're in trouble, you can always turn to us. You know, there's always a fallback. And that isn't a standard amongst families and communities. That's a frightening issue. And I think that's something the ASP can speak to in terms of abortion itself and just all relationships and like just the love between all of those different important institutions of our lives.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to do one more question before we get to Brian. John Lee, I'm going to unmute you. And if you'd like to ask your question to Amar, I'd appreciate it.
Hello, I just wanted to ask, well, I guess I'm having a tough time deciding between two questions, so I'll just ask two very similar ones, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
And that is, who would be your favorite American president within the last 100 years, and who is your favorite current foreign world leader?
Okay. Well, you know, I'll tell you I'll give you a kind of a weird answer, is that because I grew up in the 80s, in my formative years, and all I knew about politics was personality, I would have said 10, 15 years ago, Ronald Reagan. Not because of anything except how I felt growing up and seeing that person was president during those years. Looking back at that and just understanding politics now, that was really almost a starting point for the problems that we face, you know, in terms of the breakdown of society economically and how that has reached into our all the way down into our moral level and our political level and our social level. So I kind of reversed that I still think fondly of the Gipper in terms of personality. But, I think one of the things that I've come to learn throughout through history, talking to, Brian, listen to people like John Maydai, is going back to kind of legendary figures. And I think, the distributist interests of like a Teddy Roosevelt, the idea that, that it was good, small was still beautiful back then, right? And I think, obviously, as you go further and further back in time, you start to get into the issues of, well, they were men of their time, right? And so you get the aspects of racism or sexism, and I respect those issues. But when I think about, economics and like the kind of the vivacity of relationships and, working towards the little guy in, I guess, simpler times or whatever, that's kind of been my answer there. Foreign leaders, I mean, that's really tough. I mean, the world is a mess, kind of the same reason the United States is a mess. I mean, the globalization of economics has made all foreign leaders kind of very similar, in the dissimilarities come up in their personalities and their governing techniques, but in the underlying kind of nature of their countries, you just see a lot of the same issues. So I'm gonna have to pass on that one. I don't know if I have a little favorite that I look to.
I don't blame you.
Thank you, John. So, well, once again, if you have questions, if you could drop them into the chat, I would appreciate it. And even if you just give me this is what I want to have a question about, I would find that somewhat helpful or very helpful. Thank you. I'd like to introduce our candidate for the President of the United States. Brian and Vicki Carroll have been married for 47 years and have lived primarily in Visalia, California since 1977. They have 5 children and 14 grandchildren. Brian spent 44 years of his life as an educator, teaching mostly history to the 7th and 8th graders, and he spent 9 years abroad in Colombia teaching children of missionaries. He is an evangelical Christian and passionately supports whole life politics, which respect the dignity of all human life from conception to natural death. Brian ran for Congress against Devin Nunes in the 2018 California primary, and following in the footsteps of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, Brian is taking that state office defeat into what promises to be the most successful presidential candidacy in the American Solidarity Party's history. Brian is our candidate for president and is here to talk to you. Brian?
All right, thank you, Norm, and thank you for inviting me. And greetings to everyone, wherever Zoom is finding you tonight. We are approaching what many observers are saying is the most important election of our lifetime, and that may be true. They're saying that it's an existential threat to our nation and the world, and that may be true. Both sides are saying it, but they're both saying it about the other side winning. That's what both sides agree on. But they agree on little else. What we have lost is our sense of community. We've balkanized ourselves into self-contained echo chambers that read mutually exclusive news reports, and each subgroup assumes the moral authority to cancel out any other viewpoint. And many observers have found targets for blame. There is enough blame to go around. I would rather use my energy to look for solutions. And any possible solution must include 7 realities. The first reality is any solution must begin with the truth that every human life counts. Whether we use the religious term, sanctity of life, or we use a secular term like common humanity, no solution can allow one person or group to say, my life counts, but your life doesn't. No one can be discounted because of race or religion, economic or social status, age, or the condition of being born or unborn. My life counts because your life also counts. And this feeds into the second reality. There will always be tension between the truth that every life counts and the condition that every human, both individually and in tribes, were selfish. For us to fully ascribe to the dignity and worth due to others, or anyone outside of our in-group, requires either great maturity or some degree of coercion from outside of ourselves. Each of these, maturity and coercion, supports social justice. And obviously, maturity is preferable to coercion, but we must constantly battle against the pull to be less mature. We see temptations to immaturity all around us. But in a mature society, a just society, we need less government, which we would all prefer to have. The third and fourth realities are that mature societies are built around strong communities, and strong communities are centered around strong families. At a time when strong communities and strong families are finding the resources to cope with COVID-19, we are forced to look at the fact that the United States has 4 or 5 times as many single-parent households as the rest of the world. We value individualism and self-actualization to the detriment of all else. There is a sense in which our human dignity demands that we recognize each other as individuals. And we don't ever just want to be ants in an anthill. That's not our goal. And yet, at the same time, we are struggling to be self-actualized. Our economic system would be quite happy for us to be ants in their anthill. The fifth reality is that while as a country we have become more productive, a very small group of people at the top have monopolized that new wealth. We have more homeless living on the street, more people incarcerated, and we will come out of COVID-19 with fewer people owning their own businesses. Instead, they will be having to work for a wealthy few. The denizens of our anthill may work at the same big box stores, may shop at the same fast food restaurants, and share the same fantasy of someday owning a home instead of renting. But those experiences do not foster the kind of families and communities that contribute to social justice and human dignity. All of that comes before we even consider the sixth reality, which is that we live in a world suffering from pollution and human aggravated climate weirding. As in everything else, the first to suffer from these are the few or the many who have the least to start with. And these most vulnerable are the ones that those with wealth and power are the first to write off as, as somehow less worthy of basic human dignity and respect. Somehow, these marginalized communities can be easily denied social justice and economic security. Which leads to the seventh reality. There can be no peace in a world of people who are desperate for the basics of life. We can build a bigger army and a higher wall, but neither will protect us. Peace is a fruit of justice and requires solidarity among peoples and nations. Jesus was once asked to answer the question, "Who is my neighbor?" He gave a really good answer, to which I will only attempt a corollary. If a bat can pass a virus to someone in central China, and within a few weeks infect every nation on earth, we are all one neighborhood. And everyone in it is our neighbor. We are now 62 days out from what observers on both sides are calling the most important election of our lifetime. It's an election that could fragment us into smaller and smaller interest groups, or it could help foster a condition of common good, built on an understanding of common ground and relying on common sense. And that is what we in the American Solidarity Party hope to achieve. Thank you.
Well said, Brian. I'm going to, again, take privilege of asking the first question, but as I know there's a few new people in the room, if you're interested in asking a question, I'd ask you to either present the question in our chat section or at least put the subject of the question in our chat section, and I will call on you and unmute you. And no questions or no topics have been labeled out of bounds in tonight's discussion. But Brian, my first question to you is from Joseph Pierce. Joseph submitted these questions. Joseph, as you may know, is the author of Small is Still Beautiful, as we were just discussing, Economics as If Families Matter, and a known distributist and follower, devotee of E.F. Schumacher. Joseph's question is, what plans or proposals do you have for encouraging the widespread adoption of employee stock ownership plans, ESOPs, as an integral part of the American economy?
Well, I think we do have some very successful programs like that going right now. I think they tend to be offered by smaller, more closely held corporations rather than the giant public traded corporations. And I think we want to expand that. And we can do that primarily through tax advantages. We can't force somebody to, the government can't legislate that companies give stock options to their employees, but we can make it advantageous at the tax level, either by postponing some taxes so that, with a lot of the companies, when they give the stock options, they're not taxed until the stocks are sold or some other transition. And we can just continue to do that and build upon that and make it a priority that we're looking for ways to expand it. Anytime we change the tax law, we would like to change it in that direction.
Okay, thank you. And one more question from Joseph Pierce. How does the American Solidarity Party propose to address the crisis of globalism in the wake of the COVID pandemic?
Well, obviously, we wrote our platform before anybody had ever heard of COVID. So we don't directly address COVID in our platform. But we do, because we stress the fact that everybody is important, life is important at every level, we want to do what we can to protect lives. That's a high priority for us. And in the process, we don't want to isolate ourselves from the rest of the world, where President Trump has said that, we are not going to cooperate with the other countries of the world. We're not going to be a part of WHO. We're not going to be a part of the research that they're doing to come up with a inoculation of some kind. We're going to come up with our own. Well, the problem with cutting yourselves off is you are no longer part of the conversation. After World War I, when we said that we would not be part of the League of Nations, that meant that as the rest of the world was trying to deal with the rise of Hitler and Mussolini, we were not part of the conversation. We were not at the table. And we need to be cooperating with other parts of the world as we collectively attack what is a collective problem.
Thank you. I have a question in the chat from Clarissa. Clarissa, I'm going to find you here and unmute you as soon as I can find you. Let's see. I think she's just disconnected. I saw her here a second ago, and we're short one person from where we were. No, maybe not. Here we go. Clarissa, can you talk now?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Great, thank you. So I want to pose my questions as if from a member of the press and to give you an opportunity to exercise your answers. A common question would be, what qualifies each of you specifically to hold the highest public offices in the land. We appreciate both of your backgrounds in education and deep engagement with the issues, but as one prepares to take office, how would you assure the American people that you are qualified for the role of president and vice president?
I'll take that one first, I guess. First of all, when you look at the people who have been in recently, or actually in the last 100 years, they have all come from backgrounds where they owed a lot of favors to a lot of people. And those favors have kept them from serving the American people well. And we are a low budget campaign. We're not indebted to anybody except the voters. And so first of all, we go in without the binding that comes with owing a lot of people a lot of favors, and without the need to demonize either of the other parties. So much of what the American people want right now cannot be accomplished because the leadership is so entrenched and so much involved in protecting their party interests. And we don't have those kind of party interests. We're not intent on being there for the next 100 years and winning every election. We want to come in and solve some problems now. And if, at the end of 4 years, people want to reelect us, fine. If not, we'll turn it over to somebody else. And our goal is that whoever we turn it over to 4 years from now, it's in a better situation than it is when we took over. I think that's my primary answer to your question.
Hold on, Amar. Just trying to get, I'm sorry, I clicked it. I double clicked you and I messed it up. Sorry.
Hey, there we go. All right, thanks, Clarissa. Well, I have to say that I'm not as qualified because I wasn't a TV show host for 12 years. So I don't have that qualification under my belt. But I would say one of the things that as a qualification, I say we stand for a very coherent truth. And that's a very powerful qualification, because then you don't have to do mental gymnastics to do what Brian's talking about and fight battles to keep your party afloat against the other party for the sake of fighting for those, I wouldn't even call them principles at this point, right? Whatever their interests are, I think is the better way of putting it. I think that having the truth on your side is very useful as a qualification, because that brings an energy and an accessibility to, as Brian was saying, that to take anyone who also wants in the truth, wants to see the truth come into fulfillment as an advisor, right? And so you can reach out in all directions and pick and choose from qualified people for that kind of support, as opposed to picking up people who you are beholden to for money that they've given you in the past, other advantages that they've given you in the past. We'd be looking for people that, as I think I speak for Brian, that think that politics has a purpose besides just, having power, right? There is that aspect that we are trying to promote justice and virtue in society. And so anyone who has that in their heart would offer something to our side. So that I think that'll be like the cabinet, and as you're trying to make an administration, you have a much wider net to cast out to.
Okay, thank you. One bit of good news, one bit of an announcement for ASP Connecticut that I'd like to pass along this evening is the announcement that ASP Connecticut will be sponsoring yard signs and bumper magnets for anybody who is interested in picking some up. Just bear in mind that we have to order them and that you may not actually get them for another 3 to 4 weeks. But I put my email address in the chat section for the American Solidarity Party of Connecticut. And if you can, if you're interested, please email me with with your request for yard signs or bumper stickers or magnetic bumper stickers. And at the end of the meeting, I'll put up a sign essentially saying the same thing. Let's see. I have a question from a participant who doesn't want to be on the mic, but I'm going to ask it for him. Why aren't you, and this is for both of you, why aren't you campaigning for Trump or Biden? Aren't you afraid that one of them is much worse than the other? And how will you feel if your campaign ends up spoiling the election? Because no matter who loses, guess what? You're going to be blamed.
I am aware that no matter who wins, the other side will blame me for being the reason for it. But I'm also constantly told by people, thanked by people, for putting myself in a position where they can vote for somebody that they respect, somebody that they can vote for with a good conscience. And we're in a weird situation in both parties right now, where a lot of longtime Republicans and a lot of longtime Democrats are jumping ship. They are so frustrated with their own parties that they are going to support us because they would like to see the current leadership of their parties set back a little bit and maybe a fruit basket upset that allows some different people to become more important in the party. In the Democratic Party, of course, it's the pro-life Democrats, some 20 million people anyway, 20 million voters, who are extremely frustrated because there were, and always have been, pro-life Democrats. And the leadership of the Democratic Party set out in this election cycle to eliminate all of them, Dan Lipinski and others as well. And the pro-life Democrats are saying, most Democrats do not support the extreme position of the leadership that says any abortion, any time, for any reason, and government or people should pay for it, taxpayers should pay for it, is really only supported by maybe 20 or 30% of Democrats. The majority of Democrats, even if they consider themselves pro-choice, want some limits, either age limits, pain-capable limits, or waiting periods or something. They want some kind of limits. And the narrow group at the far extreme doesn't. And so we will have Democrats voting for us who would like to see their own party lose. And on the Republican Party, again, we've got a large group of the Lincoln Group and other groups of groups that have been Republicans for their whole lifetime. And they're saying, we want back in control of our party. And they would rather see their party lose. So we are providing a service to groups within those parties that would like to see their own party lose because they would like to see their party reconsider the positions they're holding.
Thank you, Brian. I'm going to, there's one other question in the queue I wanted to get to. I think it's actually a fascinating question. It's from John Lee concerning executive orders. John, if you don't mind, I'll unmute you and you can ask that. Direct it as you see fit, either to either candidate or both.
Oh, hello. This can go for both of you, but my question was, what would be your 3 first fantasy executive orders? The things you would do either the day or the days following your first day within your administration.
Well, I think even more important than executive orders are the appointments that a president makes at the beginning of his term. You want to put people in who agree with your positions, and I will be building a bipartisan cabinet. I will be taking pro-life Democrats and Republicans who have left the Trump hegemony and putting together a cabinet that will be able to work with Congress and accomplish the things we want to do. So those are actually more important than the executive orders. I would much prefer to see Congress working efficiently with the administration than to have to order things. And if I have to order things, the area that I would probably be most tempted to order would be in the area of climate change. And the specifics of that, I will wait until I am in and have some experts around me to finally craft those things. But that would be the area where I would focus on.
Okay. Okay, well, I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. If there is any other questions, you can leave them in the chat, or I'll be posting Brian and Amar's Twitter accounts. They would be most welcome if you'd follow them there and ask questions and get involved there. Thank you all. This has been probably the biggest night for American Solidarity Party of Connecticut, and this is the first time we will ever have our votes officially counted, hooray, in the tally at the end of the year. So we've reached the write-in status of being certified. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to turn, and I'll leave this screen up for a couple of minutes. Let's see. And thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you, Norm.
Thanks, Norm.